Tonight, let yourself drift into the ancient world of Rome. Let your breathing slow, let the weight of the day dissolve from your shoulders, and allow your mind to travel far from this moment. Across centuries, across oceans, to a time when the greatest empire the world had ever known stretched from the gray shores of Britain to the golden sands of Egypt. And at the very center of that empire, in a palace of marble and torchlight, sat a man who never wanted to be emperor at all. His name was Marcus Aurelius, and nearly 2,000 years after he lived and breathed and wondered about the meaning of it all, his quiet words still reach us in the dark. They reach us tonight. There is something deeply comforting about that, if you think about it gently. That a man who ruled over 60 million people, who commanded the most powerful armies on earth, who could have filled his days with luxury and spectacle and pleasure, instead chose to spend his evenings doing something remarkably simple. He sat alone, often by the dim glow of an oil lamp, and he wrote to himself, not for fame, not for publication, not for anyone else at all. He wrote the way you might speak to a friend who needed reassurance. Except the friend was himself. And those private writings, never intended for another pair of eyes, became one of the most treasured books in all of human history. We call it Meditations. But Marcus never gave it a title. He never gave it to a publisher or a scribe. He simply wrote night after night, sometimes in the field during military campaigns, sometimes in the stillness of the imperial quarters in Rome, reminding himself how to live with patience, with kindness, with acceptance of the things he could not change. Imagine, if you will, the room where he might have written. The floor is cool stone, perhaps covered here and there with a woven rug. The walls carry the faint scent of cedar and old parchment. Outside, the city murmurs in its sleep, the distant sound of a cart rolling over cobblestones, the soft call of a night bird somewhere beyond the courtyard. And Marcus sits at a wooden table, his reed pen moving slowly across the page, pausing now and then to think, to breathe, to listen to the silence. He was not born into the imperial family, not in the way you might expect. His path to the throne was an unusual one, shaped by loss and by the quiet attention of others who saw something in him. A steadiness, a depth, a seriousness that was rare in a boy so young. Marcus was born in the year 121, in Rome, into a wealthy and respected family. His father died when Marcus was very young, perhaps only 3 years old. The boy barely knew him. He was raised instead by his grandfather, a man of dignity and restraint, and by his mother Domitia Lucilla, who was known for her generosity and her devotion to simple living despite the family's considerable wealth. There is a detail about his childhood that few people know. As a young boy, Marcus became fascinated with philosophy, not in the way children sometimes latch onto passing interests, but with a genuine and persistent devotion. By the age of 12, he had adopted the rough woolen cloak of the Stoic philosophers and began sleeping on a hard wooden board instead of his comfortable bed. His mother worried, as mothers do. She eventually persuaded him to place a thin animal skin over the board, a small compromise between philosophical discipline and a parent's love. It is a tender image, this serious boy, trying so hard to live according to his ideals, and the gentle hand of his mother softening the edges just enough. The Emperor Hadrian noticed young Marcus as well. Hadrian, who was aging and had no children of his own, was searching for a successor. Not just someone who could hold power, but someone who could hold it wisely. He saw in Marcus a rare quality. There is a story, perhaps partly legend, that Hadrian gave Marcus a nickname, Verissimus, meaning the most true. Whether the story is perfectly accurate or not, It tells us something about the impression this boy made on the most powerful man in the world. He was honest, unguarded, genuine in a world that rewarded deception. Hadrian's plan was intricate. He adopted a man named Antoninus Pius, on the condition that Antoninus would in turn adopt Marcus. And so the path was set. Marcus would one day become emperor, not through ambition or violence or scheming, but through a quiet chain of thoughtful decisions made by men who believed that wisdom mattered more than strength. And yet, Marcus did not rush toward that future. He spent his youth studying. He studied rhetoric and law, as was expected of a Roman nobleman, but his heart always returned to philosophy. He studied under some of the finest teachers of his age. One of them, a man named Rusticus, gave Marcus a gift that would shape the rest of his life. A copy of the writings of Epictetus, a former slave who had become one of the most profound Stoic thinkers the world had ever known. Imagine that for a moment. The future emperor of Rome, learning the deepest lessons of his life from the words of a man who had once been owned by another human being. There is something beautiful in that, something leveling. Wisdom, as the Stoics understood, does not care about your status. It comes to whoever is willing to listen. And Marcus listened. He listened for the rest of his life. When he finally became emperor in the year 161, at the age of 39, the world he inherited was not a peaceful one. There were wars along the northern borders. There were floods and earthquakes, and then came one of the most devastating plagues in ancient history. A pandemic that swept through the empire for years, killing millions, emptying towns, weakening the army. Marcus faced all of this not from a safe distance, but directly, personally, often traveling to the front lines, often exhausting himself in the service of an empire that seemed to demand more than any one person could give. And still, in the evenings, he wrote. He wrote things like this: "When you arise in the morning, think of what a privilege it is to be alive, to think, to enjoy, to love." Such a simple thought. And yet, coming from a man who had every reason to be bitter, every reason to feel crushed by the weight of his responsibilities, it carries a quiet power. He was not writing from comfort. He was writing from the middle of difficulty. And he was reminding himself, not anyone else, just himself, to notice the good, to begin again each morning with gratitude rather than dread. This is what makes Marcus Aurelius different from so many other figures of history. He was not a saint. He did not claim to have all the answers. He struggled. He doubted. He grew frustrated with himself, with others, with the endless demands of his position. But he kept returning to his principles the way a traveler keeps returning to a familiar road. Not because the road is easy, but because it leads somewhere worth going. The philosophy that guided him, Stoicism, is often misunderstood. People sometimes hear the word Stoic and think it means cold, unfeeling, shut down. But that is not what Marcus practiced. Not at all. The Stoicism of Marcus Aurelius was warm. It was deeply human. It was about paying attention to what truly matters, your character, your choices, your response to whatever life places in front of you, and letting go of what you cannot control. The weather, the opinions of others, the past, the uncertain future, all of it released, like leaves falling from a tree in autumn. Not with bitterness, but with understanding. He wrote about this often. One of his most enduring reflections is this: the happiness of your life depends upon the quality of your thoughts. Tonight, as you lie here, perhaps that idea can settle into you gently, not as a command, not as something you must do, but as an invitation. The quality of your thoughts, not the quantity, not the speed, not the productivity of them, but the quality. The kindness in them, the patience, the willingness to let things be as they are, even if only for this moment, even if only while you rest. Marcus understood rest. He understood that the mind, like the body, needs time to be still. In a world that constantly pulled at him, generals seeking orders, senators seeking favors, provinces seeking aid, he carved out these small moments of quiet. And in those moments, he found something that all the power in the world could not give him. He found clarity. He found, again and again, the simple truth that a good life is not measured by what you accumulate or achieve, but by how you meet each moment as it comes. There is another detail about Marcus that is rarely told. Throughout his reign, he made a practice of selling off the imperial furniture and jewels whenever the empire needed funds, rather than raising taxes on his citizens. Gold dishes, silk garments, jeweled ornaments from the palace, he auctioned them publicly. It was not a grand gesture meant to impress. It was simply what he believed was right. The Stoic principle of placing the common good above personal comfort was not, for Marcus, an abstract idea. It was a daily practice. He lived it in small, concrete ways that most people never saw. And perhaps that is the most remarkable thing about him. He did not perform his virtue. He did not seek applause. The very fact that his personal journal survived is something of an accident of history. He never meant for us to read it. He was simply trying each night to be a little better than he had been the day before. Not perfect, just a little better, a little more patient, a little more aware, a little more at peace with the reality that life is brief, that it contains suffering as well as beauty, and that both can be met with grace. Tonight, you do not need to solve anything. You do not need to plan or decide or figure out what comes next. You can simply be here, breathing, resting, letting the old words of a Roman emperor settle around you like a blanket. He wrote them for himself, but they have a way of feeling as though they were written for anyone who has ever lain awake wondering if they are doing enough, being enough, living well enough. You are enough. That is not something Marcus ever wrote in exactly those words, but it is the feeling that lives beneath so many of his reflections. The constant, gentle turning back to what is simple and what is true. You are alive. You are here. And that, as he reminded himself on so many quiet evenings, is a privilege worth noticing. In the chapters that follow, we will walk slowly through the life of Marcus Aurelius. We will follow him from his boyhood studies to the marble halls of the Senate, from the frozen battlefields along the Danube River to the final, peaceful days of his life. We will listen to his words, words about anger and forgiveness, about loss and acceptance, about the strange and wonderful experience of being a human being in a world that is always changing. But there is no hurry. The story will unfold gently, the way a river moves through a valley, not rushing, not forcing, just flowing. And if sleep comes to you before the story is finished, that is perfectly fine. That is, in fact, exactly what Marcus would have wanted. Rest is not a luxury. It is a necessity. And giving yourself permission to rest, fully and without guilt, is one of the most stoic things you can do. So let your eyes grow heavy. Let your body sink a little deeper into wherever you are lying. The ancient world is patient. It has waited nearly 2,000 years. Can wait a little longer while you sleep. And when you are ready, we will continue. We will go back to Rome, to the boy with the wooden board and the woolen cloak, and we will watch him grow into the man who would lead an empire, not with force but with thought, not with fear but with philosophy, not with noise but with a quiet voice, writing by lamplight, reminding himself of what matters most. For now, just breathe, just rest. The words will be here when you return. Let your body settle deeper now. Feel the warmth of the blankets around you, the gentle weight pressing you into the softness beneath. We continue our journey through the ancient world, back to a time when the fate of millions rested on the shoulders of a quiet, thoughtful boy. Marcus Aurelius was born on April 26th, in the year 121, in the heart of Rome. His family, the Anii, were not emperors or kings. They were something perhaps more interesting. They were among Rome's most respected aristocratic families, people who had earned their place through generations of public service, wisdom, and quiet dignity. His grandfather, Marcus Annius Verus, had served as consul 3 times, one of the highest honors in Roman political life. It was a household where duty was not a word spoken lightly. It was the very air they breathed. The boy's father, Marcus Annius Verus III, died when Marcus was only 3 years old. Imagine that for a moment. A child, barely old enough to form lasting memories, losing the man who should have guided him through the world. And yet, rather than being consumed by grief or lost to neglect, young Marcus was embraced by a family that believed in something greater than individual sorrow. His grandfather took him in, raised him in a home filled with books, conversation, and the steady rhythm of Roman civic life. There is a detail that historians sometimes overlook, one that reveals much about the kind of boy Marcus was. Even as a young child, he insisted on sleeping on a hard wooden board rather than the soft, luxurious beds available to a family of his wealth. His mother, Domitia Lucilla, worried about this habit. What kind of child chooses discomfort when comfort is freely offered? The answer, perhaps, is the kind of child who would one day write, "The impediment to action advances action. What stands in the way becomes the way." But that wisdom was still decades away. For now, he was simply a boy growing up in one of the most fascinating cities the world has ever known. Rome in the 2nd century was a place of astonishing contrasts. Magnificent temples stood alongside crowded tenement buildings. The smell of exotic spices from distant lands mixed with the earthy scent of the Tiber River. Philosophers debated in public squares while gladiators trained for combat in the shadow of the Colosseum. It was a city of over 1 million people, the largest the world had ever seen, and it hummed with an energy that must have been both thrilling and overwhelming for a sensitive young mind. Marcus received the education typical of a Roman aristocrat, but he took to his studies with an unusual intensity. He learned Greek, which was considered the language of philosophy and high culture, much as French would be in later European courts. He studied rhetoric, the art of persuasion and public speaking, which was essential for anyone who wished to participate in Roman political life. He read Homer and Virgil, absorbing the great stories of heroes and their struggles. But it was philosophy that captured his heart in a way that nothing else could. Let your breathing slow as we explore this transformation. Feel each breath as a gentle wave, carrying you deeper into relaxation, deeper into this ancient story. The moment that changed everything came when Marcus was around 12 years old. He encountered the teachings of the Stoic philosophers, and something inside him recognized a truth he had been searching for without knowing it. The Stoics taught that the path to a good life lay not in the pursuit of pleasure or the accumulation of wealth, but in the cultivation of virtue. They believed that we cannot control what happens to us, but we can always control how we respond. They taught that every human being carries within them a spark of the divine reason that orders the universe, and that living in accordance with this reason is the highest purpose of human existence. For a boy who had already lost his father, who had already chosen a hard bed over a soft one, these ideas must have felt like coming home. Here was a philosophy that did not promise comfort or ease, promised something far more valuable, promised a way to find meaning and peace regardless of what life might bring. Marcus began to adopt the habits of a philosopher with the earnestness that would characterize his entire life. He started wearing a rough Greek cloak, the traditional garment of the philosophical schools, rather than the fine Roman togas his family's wealth could provide. He would sometimes sleep on the ground, further training himself in the art of needing little. His mother continued to worry, but there was something in the boy's determination that commanded respect even from those who did not fully understand it. It was around this time that Marcus came to the attention of the Emperor Hadrian. Now, Hadrian was one of the most remarkable men ever to wear the imperial purple. He was a soldier, an architect, a poet, and a restless traveler who had walked the length and breadth of his vast empire. He had overseen the construction of the famous wall in Britain that still bears his name. He had rebuilt the Pantheon in Rome, creating one of the most beautiful buildings in human history. And he had an eye for talent, an ability to recognize greatness in its earliest, most unformed stages. What Hadrian saw in young Marcus was something rare. Here was a boy of noble birth who showed no interest in the usual aristocratic pursuits of hunting, gaming, and social climbing. Instead, he spent his time reading philosophy, practicing self-discipline, and asking questions about the nature of justice and the good life. Hadrian gave him an affectionate nickname, Verissimus, meaning the most truthful one. In a world where flattery and deception were the common currencies of power, this was perhaps the highest compliment anyone could receive. Let these thoughts settle around you like a warm blanket. There is no need to hold onto them tightly. Let them drift through your mind like clouds passing across a moonlit sky. Hadrian's recognition set in motion a chain of events that would shape the course of history. The aging emperor had no children of his own, and the question of succession weighed heavily on his mind. Rome had learned through bitter experience that the transfer of power could be a bloody and chaotic affair. Hadrian devised an elegant solution. He would adopt a successor who would in turn adopt his own successor, creating a planned line of stable leadership. Hadrian first adopted a man named Lucius Sionius Commodus, but fate intervened when Commodus died of illness before he could assume power. Hadrian then turned to Antoninus Pius, a respected senator known for his integrity and calm temperament. But Hadrian attached a condition to this adoption that revealed his true long-term vision. Antoninus must in turn adopt two boys, Marcus Aurelius, who was then about 17 years old, and Lucius Verus, the young son of the recently deceased Commodus. Imagine the weight of this moment. A teenager devoted to philosophy and the quiet life of the mind, suddenly thrust into the line of imperial succession. The most powerful position in the known world was being placed, however distantly, within his reach. Many young men would have been intoxicated by such a prospect. Marcus, characteristically, is said to have been more troubled than excited. When he learned of Hadrian's plans, he reportedly felt a deep sadness, as though he could already sense that the philosopher's life he loved was slipping away from him. Hadrian died in July of 138, and Antoninus Pius became emperor. He proved to be everything Hadrian had hoped, a wise, measured, and deeply humane ruler. For the next 23 years, Antoninus governed the empire with a steady hand, and during all that time Marcus served at his side, learning the art of leadership not from books alone but from the living example of a good man doing difficult work with grace and patience. Marcus watched how Antoninus handled crises without panic, how he listened to all sides of a dispute before rendering judgment, how he treated even the lowest servant with the same courtesy he showed to senators and generals. Years later, Marcus would fill an entire section of his meditations with the lessons he learned from this adoptive father, lessons about patience, about the importance of thorough deliberation, about the danger of being swept up in the emotions of the moment. From my father, Marcus wrote, I learned mildness and an unshakable commitment to decisions carefully made. I learned indifference to empty honors and a love of work and perseverance. During these years of preparation, Marcus continued his philosophical studies with some of the greatest teachers of the age. He studied with Apollonius of Chalcedon, who taught him to remain constant in the face of sharp pain and personal loss. He studied with Sextus of Carinthia, a grandson of the great Plutarch, who showed him what it meant to live without pretension. And he studied with Junius Rusticus, perhaps the most important of all his teachers, who introduced him to the discourses of Epictetus. Epictetus was a former slave who had become one of the most influential philosophers in Roman history. His teachings, recorded by his student Arrian, would become the foundation of Marcus's own philosophical practice. Epictetus taught that freedom is not a matter of external circumstances. A slave can be free in spirit, while an emperor can be enslaved by his own desires and fears. This teaching must have struck Marcus with particular force, knowing as he did that an emperor's throne awaited him, and knowing too that such power could corrupt even the strongest soul. Let your mind rest with these images of the young Marcus, studying by lamplight, walking through the gardens of the imperial palace, slowly and carefully preparing himself for a role he never sought but would fulfill with extraordinary dedication. There is something deeply peaceful about watching a person grow into their purpose, about seeing the quiet accumulation of wisdom that comes from years of patient study and self-examination. The years passed, and Marcus grew from a thoughtful boy into a serious, deeply principled young man. He married Faustina, the daughter of Antoninus Pius, in the year 145. By all accounts, he loved her dearly, though their marriage, like all marriages, would have its share of challenges and sorrows. Together they would have 13 children, though tragically only 5 would survive to adulthood, a reminder of the fragility of life that even an emperor's wealth and power could not overcome. As you drift deeper towards sleep, carry with you this image of Marcus in his years of preparation. A young man who did not seek power but prepared himself for it with extraordinary care. A philosopher who knew that the truest test of wisdom is not what we think or say, but how we live. A human being who understood, even in his youth, that the path to peace lies not in avoiding difficulty, but in meeting it with clarity, courage, and an open heart. The night is quiet around you now. The ancient world grows soft and hazy at the edges, like a painting seen through candlelight. Marcus is there, still young, still learning, still becoming the person he was meant to be. And in that becoming, there is a lesson for all of us. We are all always in the process of becoming, and that process, with all its uncertainty and struggle, is not something to fear. It is the very substance of a meaningful life. Rest now. Let the story carry you. There is more to tell, but it will wait for you, patient as philosophy itself, ready whenever you are ready to continue the journey. And so we come to the day the crown passed to him. It was March of the year 161, and Antoninus Pius, the man who had been both emperor and father figure to Marcus, lay dying. The accounts tell us that Antoninus spent his final hours calmly, as though death were simply the next appointment on a long and well-ordered schedule. He gave the golden statue of Fortuna, a symbol traditionally kept in the emperor's bedchamber, to Marcus. He spoke a single word to the captain of his guard when asked for the night's watchword. The word was equanimitas. Equanimity, a fitting final instruction from a man who had governed with steadiness for more than 2 decades. Marcus was 39 years old. He had spent the better part of his life preparing for this moment, and yet, by every account, he did not welcome it. He wept at the death of Antoninus. He resisted the Senate's insistence that he take the throne immediately. And in one of his first acts as emperor, he did something that had never been done before in Roman history. He insisted on sharing power. Marcus elevated his adopted brother Lucius Verus to the position of co-emperor, equal in title, equal in authority. This was unprecedented. Rome had always had one supreme ruler. The idea of 2 emperors governing side by side was as strange to the Roman world as it might seem natural to us today. But Marcus did not want sole power. He remembered Hadrian's original plan, which had named both boys as future leaders. And more importantly, he believed that power concentrated in a single person was dangerous, no matter how wise that person might be. It is worth pausing here to let this detail settle in your mind. Imagine being given absolute authority over the known world, the armies, the treasury, the laws, the lives of 60 million people, and your first instinct is to give half of it away. Not out of weakness, not because you were forced to, but because you believed it was the right thing to do. This tells us more about Marcus Aurelius than perhaps any passage in his Meditations. The early years of his reign were not the peaceful continuation of Antoninus's era that Marcus might have hoped for. Almost immediately, the empire was tested. In the east, the Parthian Empire, Rome's oldest and most formidable rival, launched a major invasion of the Roman provinces of Armenia and Syria. Legions were destroyed. Cities fell. The eastern frontier, which had been relatively stable for decades, was suddenly in crisis. Marcus sent Lucius Verus to lead the campaign in the east, while he himself remained in Rome to manage the vast machinery of imperial government. The war lasted several years and was ultimately successful. The Roman legions pushed the Parthians back and recaptured the lost territories. But victory came at a terrible, unforeseen cost. The soldiers returning from the east brought something back with them, something invisible and devastating. It was a plague. We know it today as the Antonine Plague, named after the dynasty of emperors to which Marcus belonged. Modern scholars believe it may have been smallpox, though we cannot be entirely certain. What we do know is that it swept through the empire like a slow, relentless tide. It moved from military camp to military camp, from city to city, from province to province. At its worst, it may have killed as many as 2,000 people a day in Rome alone. Over the course of 15 years, it claimed the lives of between 5 and 10 million people across the empire. Try to imagine the weight of that. You are the emperor. You are responsible for everything, the army, the economy, the law, the well-being of your people. And now a sickness is moving through your world that you cannot fight, cannot negotiate with, cannot stop. The physicians of Rome had no understanding of how the disease spread. There was no treatment, no vaccine, no way to protect the vulnerable. People simply fell ill, and many of them died. Rich and poor, soldier and civilian, senator and slave, the plague did not discriminate. Marcus did not retreat from this crisis. He did not hide in his palace or flee to one of his country estates, as some rulers might have done. Instead, he did something that reveals the very core of his character. He opened the imperial treasury. He auctioned off the palace furnishings, gold dishes, silk robes, jeweled ornaments, even his wife's collection of fine garments, to raise funds for the relief effort. He refused to raise taxes on a population already suffering. He took the burden upon himself and upon the wealth of the imperial household. There is a record, preserved in the ancient histories, that Marcus personally oversaw the funeral rites of plague victims in Rome, ensuring that even the poorest citizens received proper burial. In a society that was deeply concerned with the rituals of death, this was not a small gesture. It was an act of profound respect for the dignity of every person, regardless of their station. And it was entirely consistent with what the Stoics had taught him, that every human being shares in the same rational nature, the same spark of the divine, and therefore deserves the same basic measure of care and honor. While the plague was still raging, a new threat emerged along the empire's northern frontier. The Germanic and Sarmatian tribes beyond the Danube River, peoples who had been held in check for generations by Roman military strength, sensed that the empire was weakened. They began to raid across the border, burning villages, seizing livestock, and testing the depleted Roman defenses. What began as scattered raids soon escalated into a full-scale invasion. Marcus had no choice but to go to war. This was not a war he wanted. It was not a war he had provoked. It was simply the situation that life had placed in front of him, and like a good Stoic, he met it with the only tools he trusted: duty, discipline, and a steady refusal to be overwhelmed by what he could not control. He traveled north to the Danube frontier and spent much of the next decade there, living in military camps, enduring harsh winters, managing a war that stretched across hundreds of miles of forest and river and open plain. He was not a natural soldier. He was a philosopher by temperament, a man who would have been happiest in a library or a garden, discussing ideas with friends. But he led his armies with competence and courage, earning the respect of his soldiers through his willingness to share their hardships rather than directing the war from a comfortable distance. It was during these long, difficult years on the frontier that Marcus wrote much of what we now call the Meditations. Picture him in his tent at night, after the day's councils and inspections and decisions have been made. The camp is quiet except for the occasional call of a sentry. The air is cold. Winter along the Danube is bitter, far colder than anything Marcus would have known in Rome. A single lamp burns on his small wooden table, and he writes. He does not write about strategy or politics. He does not record the events of the day. Instead, he writes to himself about how to live, how to remain calm in the face of difficulty, how to treat others with fairness and patience even when they do not deserve it, how to accept that some things are beyond your control without losing your sense of purpose or your will to act on the things that are within your reach. You have power over your mind, not outside events, he wrote. Realize this, and you will find strength. These words were not written from a place of comfort or safety. They were written in the middle of a war, in the middle of a plague, by a man who was exhausted and grieving and carrying a weight that would have crushed most people. And yet the words are calm. They are clear. They are gentle even, as though Marcus had found, in the very act of writing, a small space of peace within the storm. He wrote about death often, not with fear, but with a kind of quiet acceptance. The Stoics believed that death is a natural part of life, no more to be feared than the changing of the seasons. Marcus reminded himself of this again and again, perhaps because he needed to. He had lost children. At least 5 of his 13 children died in infancy or childhood, a grief that no philosophy can fully ease. He had lost friends and mentors and fellow soldiers. He had watched the plague carry away people he loved. And through it all, he kept writing. He kept reminding himself that life is brief, that it is precious precisely because it is brief, and that the only proper response to its brevity is to live each day with as much integrity and kindness as you can manage. There is a passage in the Meditations where Marcus compares human life to a river. Everything is flowing, he says. Our bodies, our thoughts, our experiences. All of it is moving, changing, passing away. Nothing stays. Nothing is permanent. And rather than finding this thought depressing, Marcus finds in it a kind of freedom. If nothing lasts, then there is no point in clinging. No point in hoarding. No point in being afraid of loss, because loss is simply the nature of things. What matters is not how long you hold something, but how you hold it while it is yours. Tonight, as you lie here in the quiet, perhaps you can feel something of what Marcus felt on those cold nights along the Danube. Not the hardship, you are warm, you are safe, you are resting, but the stillness. The sense that for a few moments, at least, the world has slowed down enough to allow you to simply be. To breathe. To let your thoughts drift like leaves on that river Marcus described, moving gently, going wherever the current takes them, without resistance, without effort. Marcus did not find peace by escaping his circumstances. He found it by moving through them with his eyes open and his heart steady. He did not pretend that life was easy. He did not deny the suffering around him or his own exhaustion and doubt. He simply chose, again and again, to meet whatever came with the best of himself. And on the nights when the best of himself felt very small indeed, he wrote. He put words on paper. He reminded himself of what he believed, and somehow that was enough to carry him through to the morning. Lucius Verus, his co-emperor and adopted brother, died in the year 169, likely from the plague or from the aftereffects of a stroke. Marcus mourned him and carried on alone. The war in the north continued. The plague continued. The demands of governing continued. And Marcus continued to write. He was not superhuman. He was tired. His health, never robust, deteriorated over the years of campaigning. Ancient sources mention chronic stomach ailments, difficulty sleeping, and a general frailty that he fought against with the same quiet determination he brought to everything else. He took a medicine compounded by his physician Galen, one of the most famous doctors in history, that contained small amounts of opium, which helped him manage pain and find what sleep he could. Even in this, there is something deeply human and relatable. The Emperor of Rome, lying awake at night, unable to sleep, reaching for whatever small comfort might help him rest. You do not need to be an emperor to know that feeling. You do not need to be fighting a war on the Danube to understand what it is like to lie in the dark and wait for sleep to come. But Marcus would tell you, if he could speak to you tonight, if his voice could reach across the centuries, that it is all right. That wakefulness is not a failure. That rest comes when it comes, and in the meantime, you can simply be here, breathing, letting the day fall away from you piece by piece, like snow melting in the warmth of a fire. The philosopher king did not have all the answers. He never claimed to. What he had was a practice, a daily, patient, imperfect practice of turning toward what is good and letting go of what he could not change. And that practice sustained him through years of difficulty that would have broken many others. Let it sustain you now in this much smaller and gentler way. Let the thought of Marcus, writing in his tent, the lamp flickering, the world outside dark and cold and vast. Let that image settle into your mind as you settle into rest. He is not asking anything of you. He is simply showing you, by his example, that it is possible to find stillness even in the middle of everything. Close your eyes if they are not closed already. Let your breathing deepen. The story will go on. The philosopher king has more to teach us, more to share, more quiet wisdom to offer in the hours ahead. But for now, this is enough. This moment, this breath, this rest. It is enough. Tonight, we return to the story of Marcus Aurelius. But this time, we are going to do something different. We are going to look at the book itself, the private journal that Marcus kept during the hardest years of his life. The book we now call the Meditations. It is, by any measure, one of the most remarkable documents in all of human history. Not because it was written to be remarkable. Not because Marcus intended anyone to read it. But precisely because he didn't. These were notes to himself. Reminders. Quiet conversations between a man and his own conscience. Written in stolen moments at the end of long and difficult days. Let your body settle as we begin. Find a comfortable position and let the weight of today slowly release from your shoulders. The room is quiet. The world outside can wait. For now, there is only this story and the soft cadence of these words, carrying you gently toward rest. The Meditations were never given a title by Marcus. He never organized them into chapters or prepared them for publication. What we have is something rawer and more intimate than that. A series of reflections written over many years, mostly during the long military campaigns along the Danube frontier. They come to us in 12 books, though even that division may not be Marcus's own. Some scholars believe the books were arranged by later editors who gathered the scattered pages of the emperor's private writings after his death. The first book is different from all the others. In it, Marcus does something that no other ancient philosopher did in quite this way. He writes a list of the people who shaped him, and he names, with extraordinary specificity, what he learned from each of them. His grandfather taught him gentleness and the control of temper. His mother taught him reverence for the divine and generosity, not only in material things but in the deeper sense of not thinking narrowly or suspiciously. From his tutor Diognetus, he learned to be unimpressed by trivial things, to endure discomfort, and to listen to anyone who had something worthwhile to say. Picture Marcus writing these acknowledgments. He is not young anymore. He has been emperor for years. He has buried children, fought wars, and navigated political crises that would have overwhelmed most people. And yet, here at the beginning of his private journal, he takes the time to remember every person who helped him become who he is. There is something deeply moving about this. The most powerful man in the world, sitting down to write about gratitude. Let that thought settle into your mind as your breathing slows. Gratitude, not as a practice or a technique, but as a natural response to remembering how much we have received from others. Marcus understood this instinctively. No one is self-made. Every good quality we possess was planted in us by someone else. A parent, a teacher, a friend, sometimes even a stranger whose kindness we never forgot. From Book 2 onward, the tone changes. Marcus is no longer looking backward at the people who shaped him. He is looking inward, at the daily struggle to live well. And what strikes you immediately is how honest he is with himself. There is no posturing in the Meditations, no attempt to sound impressive or wise. Marcus writes like a man who knows he falls short of his own ideals and is trying, every single day, to close that gap. He reminds himself again and again that life is short, not in a morbid way, not to frighten himself, but to clarify what matters. When you remember that you will die, that everyone you know will die, the petty irritations of daily life lose their power. The colleague who annoyed you, the plan that didn't work out, the small humiliation you suffered in public. None of these things matter against the vast backdrop of time. Marcus saw this clearly, And he returned to this theme throughout the meditations because he needed to keep reminding himself. Even the wisest among us forget. There is a passage early in the meditations where Marcus tells himself to begin each morning by anticipating the difficulties ahead. He writes that he will meet people who are ungrateful, arrogant, dishonest, and envious. But he also reminds himself that these people act this way out of ignorance. They do not understand what is truly good and what is truly harmful. And because Marcus shares the same rational nature with all human beings, he cannot be angry with them. They are, in a real sense, his family. This is not idealism. This is not naive optimism. This is a practical strategy for getting through the day without being consumed by frustration. And it is remarkable because Marcus was writing this not from the comfort of a philosophy classroom but from a military camp, surrounded by exactly the kind of difficult people he describes. He was managing generals, politicians, and courtiers, people whose ambitions and fears made them unpredictable and sometimes dangerous. His advice to himself was not theoretical. It was survival. Let your mind drift with these ideas. You do not need to memorize them or analyze them. Just let them wash over you like the sound of distant water. Marcus wrote for himself, and perhaps the best way to receive his words is in the same spirit. Privately, quietly, without effort. One of the recurring themes in the meditations is the idea of the inner citadel. Marcus believed that every human being possesses an inner fortress, a place of calm and clarity that cannot be touched by external events. You can lose your wealth, your reputation, your health, even the people you love. But the inner citadel remains as long as you choose to maintain it. No one can enter it without your permission. No event can breach its walls unless you open the gates yourself. This is perhaps the most practical teaching in all of Stoic philosophy. It does not require you to change the world. It does not ask you to become someone you are not. It simply says, you have a choice about how you respond to what happens to you. And in that choice lies all of your freedom. Marcus tested this idea under the most extreme conditions imaginable. As emperor, he faced a constant stream of crises. Wars, plagues, betrayals, natural disasters. His co-emperor Lucius Verus was unreliable. His wife Faustina was the subject of vicious gossip. His generals sometimes defied him. And through all of it, Marcus tried to return to the inner citadel. Not always successfully. He admits in the meditations that he sometimes fails, that he sometimes loses his temper or allows himself to be dragged into anxiety. But he always comes back. He always tries again. There is a beautiful metaphor that Marcus uses somewhere in the later books. He compares the mind to a sphere, perfectly smooth, self-contained, rolling through the world without being caught or snagged by anything it touches. This is the ideal. Not a rigid fortress but something more graceful, a shape that moves through difficulty without being deformed by it. Your breathing has probably slowed by now. Your body is heavier against the bed, your thoughts beginning to lose their sharp edges. This is good. This is the body remembering what the mind sometimes forgets, that rest is not a luxury but a necessity. Even Marcus knew this. Even the emperor had to sleep. Another theme that runs through the meditations like a thread of gold is the idea of nature. Marcus returns again and again to the natural world as a source of perspective and comfort. He writes about the beauty of bread as it bakes, the way the crust cracks open, and though those cracks are not part of the baker's intention, they have their own kind of beauty. He writes about olives on the verge of falling from the tree, about the foam on a wild boar's mouth, about the way aging transforms a face. In all of these observations, Marcus finds something worth contemplating. Nothing in nature is ugly when seen clearly. Nothing is without meaning. This is not sentimentality. It is a way of training the eye to see what is actually there, rather than imposing our judgments on everything we encounter. The Stoics believed that most of our suffering comes not from events themselves but from our opinions about those events. A thunderstorm is not good or bad. It is simply a thunderstorm. A difficult conversation is not a catastrophe. It is simply a conversation that requires patience and skill. By stripping away our automatic judgments, we can meet each moment freshly, with curiosity rather than fear. Marcus also writes extensively about time. He is fascinated and humbled by the way time erases everything. Alexander the Great and his mule driver, he notes, were both reduced to the same thing in death. The grandest achievements of the Roman Empire will eventually be forgotten, just as the empires before Rome were forgotten. This is not despair. For Marcus, it is liberation. If nothing lasts, then there is no point in clinging. If everything passes, then the only thing that matters is how you live right now in this moment. There are passages in the Meditations that feel as though they were written this morning. Marcus worries about wasting time. He scolds himself for sleeping too late, for being distracted, for caring too much about what others think of him. He reminds himself to focus on what is essential and to let go of everything else. These are not the concerns of an ancient Roman emperor. These are the concerns of every thoughtful person who has ever lived. And perhaps that is the deepest gift of the Meditations. Not the specific advice, which is sometimes dated and sometimes contradictory, but the example. Here is a man who had every reason to believe he was special. He ruled the known world, he was called a god by his subjects, and yet he spent his private moments trying to be a better human being. He did not assume that power made him wise. He did not confuse his position with his character. He kept writing, kept questioning, kept reaching for something higher than what the world offered him. The night is growing deeper now. The story of the Meditations is the story of a man talking to himself in the dark, trying to find his way. And is that not what all of us are doing in our own way? Lying in the quiet of our rooms, sifting through the day's events, trying to make sense of what happened and who we want to be tomorrow. Marcus would understand. He was doing the same thing 2,000 years ago, in a tent on the edge of the Roman frontier, with the sound of wind and sentries and the distant murmur of a river he could not see. He was tired. He was worried. He was doing his best. And he wrote it all down, not knowing that his private words would survive the centuries and find their way to us, here, tonight. Let that connection comfort you. Across all the years and all the distance, you share something with Marcus Aurelius. You share the experience of being human, of lying awake, of wondering, of hoping to do better. And if a Roman emperor could find peace in that experience, perhaps you can too. Close your eyes now if they are not already closed. Let the words dissolve into silence. The Meditations will be here when you return. The wisdom of Marcus will wait for you, patient and steady, like a lamp that never goes out. Rest now. You have done enough for today. Tomorrow is its own story, and it will unfold in its own time. For now, there is only this breath, this stillness, this gentle drift towards sleep. It is enough. Tonight, as the world grows quiet around you, we are going to explore one of the deepest themes in the philosophy of Marcus Aurelius. It is a theme that, at first glance, might seem too heavy for the gentle hours before sleep. But as you will discover, Marcus found in it not heaviness but lightness, not fear but freedom. We are going to talk about death. and about the way everything changes, everything passes, everything returns to where it came from. Settle into your bed. Let the pillow accept the weight of your head. Let your hands fall open, your jaw unclench, your shoulders release whatever tension they have been carrying. The day is over. Whatever happened, good or difficult or somewhere in between, it is finished now. And in that finishing there is a kind of peace. Marcus Aurelius thought about death more than almost any other philosopher in history. Not because he was morbid, not because he was afraid, but because he believed that remembering death was the key to living well. If you forget that your time is limited, you waste it. You spend your energy on things that do not matter. You postpone the conversations you should have today. You put off the work that only you can do. But if you hold death gently in your awareness, not as a threat but as a fact as natural as breathing, then everything comes into focus. You stop wasting time on anger. You stop hoarding things you do not need. You stop pretending that the small irritations of daily life are worth your precious hours. Marcus wrote about this often in his journal. He had a way of listing the great figures of the past, emperors, philosophers, generals, artists, and then noting simply that they are all gone. Augustus is gone. Hadrian is gone. The brilliant physicians who attended them, gone. The astrologers who predicted their futures, gone. The horses they rode, the palaces they built, the lovers they cherished, all gone, dissolved back into the elements from which they came. This is not meant to depress you. Lie still and listen. Let these thoughts move through you like clouds crossing a night sky. Marcus was not trying to make himself sad. He was trying to wake himself up. Because when you truly understand that everything is temporary, including you, including the people you love, including the worries that keep you awake at night, something remarkable happens. You become free. Free from the endless grasping and clinging that causes so much of our suffering. Free to appreciate what is here, right now, in this moment, because you know it will not last. Think of it this way. A sunset is beautiful precisely because it is brief. If the sky stayed orange and gold forever, you would stop noticing it. It is the fading that makes it precious. Marcus understood this about all of life. Every conversation, every meal, every quiet evening at home. These things are beautiful because they are passing. And the awareness of their passing does not diminish them. It deepens them. In one of his most famous passages, Marcus invites us to think about the court of Augustus. All the marriages and deaths, the intrigues and celebrations, the wars and treaties that consumed that era. Then he asks us to consider that the entire court of Augustus is now like a household that has died out. Every single person, from the emperor to the lowest servant, is gone. And so it will be with every era, including our own. Including the people you passed on the street today. Including the people you will see tomorrow. Let your breathing slow. Let these thoughts become gentler, softer, more like a lullaby than a lecture. You do not need to solve the problem of death tonight. No one has ever solved it. What you can do, what Marcus did, is simply acknowledge it. Sit with it. Let it inform the way you live without letting it terrify you. The Stoics had a phrase for this practice. They called it memento mori, remember that you will die. It sounds harsh in translation, but in practice it was meant to be gentle. A quiet tap on the shoulder. A reminder to pay attention. The Latin words carried the warmth of a friend's advice, not the coldness of a threat. Marcus practiced memento mori not just for himself but for the things around him. He would look at a beautiful object and remind himself that it would break. He would enjoy a good meal and know that the pleasure would fade. He would hold his children and understand, with the aching clarity of a parent, that nothing could guarantee their safety. This was not pessimism. This was love with open eyes. This was the courage to care deeply while knowing that everything you care about is temporary. There is a passage in the Meditations where Marcus compares human life to a river. Everything is flowing, he writes. Our bodies, our thoughts, our sensations, all of it is in constant motion, constantly changing. You cannot step into the same river twice, as the older philosopher Heraclitus said, because the water has moved on. And you have moved on too. The person you were this morning is not quite the same person lying here tonight. Every cell in your body is being replaced. Every thought is arising and passing away. You are, at every moment, a new creation. This might sound unsettling, but Marcus found it comforting. If everything is changing, then nothing is permanent enough to be truly threatening. The anxiety you feel right now will pass. The sadness that visited you this week will lift. The difficult situation at work will resolve itself one way or another. Nothing stays. And while that means the good things do not last, it also means the bad things do not last either. Picture a river at night. The water is dark, catching only the faintest glimmers of starlight. It moves steadily, without effort, without complaint. It does not try to hold on to the stones it flows over. It does not resist the curves of its own banks. It simply moves, carrying whatever falls into it, releasing what needs to be released, finding its way to the sea through patience and persistence. You are like that river tonight. Your thoughts are the water. Let them flow. Do not try to hold on to any single thought. Do not resist the ones that seem dark or difficult. Just let them move through you and away, the way the river carries leaves and twigs without being troubled by them. Marcus also wrote about the vastness of time. He loved to stretch his mind across enormous spans, not just centuries but millennia, not just human history but the history of the cosmos itself. He would contemplate the infinite past that preceded his birth and the infinite future that would follow his death. And in that vast perspective, a human life, even the life of an emperor, was barely a flicker. A candle lit for a moment in an endless darkness. Again, this was not meant to diminish. It was meant to liberate. If your life is a brief moment in the vastness of time, then there is no room for pettiness. There is no time for grudges. There is no point in accumulating power or wealth beyond what you actually need. The only thing that matters is how you use the time you have. Are you kind? Are you honest? Are you contributing something good to the people around you? These are the only questions that matter when you remember how brief the opportunity is. The room is very quiet now. Perhaps you can hear your own heartbeat, steady and reassuring, marking out the moments one by one. Each heartbeat is a gift, not because it is owed to you, but because it is given freely without your asking, without your effort. Your heart has been beating since before you were born, and it will continue until the moment it stops. You do not control it. You cannot command it. It is a mystery, this life force that sustains you, and it asks nothing of you in return except that you let it do its work. Marcus understood this mystery. He felt it deeply, even as he tried to understand it with his rational mind. The Stoics believed that all of nature was animated by a kind of divine reason, a logos they called it, that ordered everything from the orbits of the planets to the growth of a single blade of grass. Death was not the end of this order but part of it. When a person died, their elements returned to the whole. Their atoms were recycled into new forms, new plants, new animals, new human beings. Nothing was truly lost, only rearranged. There is something profoundly peaceful in this view. Your body is made of atoms that were once part of stars, part of mountains, part of ancient oceans. And when you are gone, those same atoms will become part of something else. Something equally real, equally beautiful, equally alive. You are, in the most literal sense, connected to everything that has ever existed and everything that ever will. Let that thought carry you. You are not separate from the world. You are not a lonely island of consciousness floating in a void. You are woven into the fabric of existence itself, as intimately as a thread in a tapestry. When you sleep tonight, you are resting in the same universe that held Marcus Aurelius, that held every person who has ever lived, that holds the stars and the seas and the quiet darkness between galaxies. Marcus wrote near the end of his meditations that the longest-lived and the shortest-lived person lose the same thing in death. Both lose only the present moment because that is all anyone ever has. The past is already gone. The future has not yet arrived. The only thing that is real is now. And now is always exactly the same length, whether you are an emperor or a child, whether you live to be 100 or die tomorrow. This is perhaps the most radical insight in all of Stoic philosophy. If the present moment is all that exists, then death cannot rob you of much. It can only take this breath, this heartbeat, this sensation of lying in a warm bed with the sounds of the world growing dim around you. And this moment, however brief, is complete in itself. It does not need the future to justify it. It does not need to last forever to be real. Your eyes are heavy now, or perhaps they have been closed for some time. The story of Marcus and his thoughts on death has carried you to a place of stillness, a place where the boundary between waking and sleeping grows thin and soft. This is a good place to be. There is nothing you need to do here, nothing you need to figure out. The questions that Marcus raised about time, about death, about the nature of existence, these are questions that have no final answers. They are meant to be lived with, not solved. They are companions for the journey, not destinations. Rest now. Let the river of your thoughts carry you into sleep. The world will be here when you wake, changed and yet the same, turning slowly through the darkness, carrying all of us, the living and the dead, the remembered and the forgotten, toward whatever comes next. Marcus would tell you not to worry about what comes next. He would tell you to be here, now, in this breath, in this stillness, in this gentle surrender to the night. It is enough. It has always been enough. Tonight, let us return once more to the world of Marcus Aurelius. The room around you is quiet. The day has finished its work, and now it is your turn to rest. But before sleep takes you, let us visit an idea that sustained Marcus through some of the hardest years any human being has ever faced. The Stoics called it the inner citadel, and it may be the most useful idea ever offered to a person lying awake in the dark, trying to find peace. Let your body relax. Begin with your feet. Let them grow heavy. Let the muscles soften. Move your attention slowly upward, through your ankles, your calves, your knees. Let each part of your body release its hold on the day. Your thighs, your hips, your lower back. All of it settling deeper into the mattress. There is nothing you need to hold on to right now. Nothing you need to carry. The weight of the world is not yours tonight. The idea of the inner citadel is simple, but its implications are vast. Marcus believed that every human being possesses, deep within themselves, a place that cannot be touched by external events. A fortress of the mind. A space of calm and clarity that exists regardless of what is happening outside. Wars can rage, empires can crumble, friends can betray you, your body can fail you, and still, this inner space remains intact, because it is not made of anything that can be damaged. It is made of your capacity to choose how you respond to what happens to you. Think about that for a moment. You cannot control the weather. You cannot control the economy. You cannot control what other people say about you or think about you or do to you. You cannot even control many of the thoughts that arise in your own mind. They come and go like weather patterns, unpredictable and sometimes unwelcome. But you can control one thing, and it is the only thing that matters: your response. Marcus tested this principle under conditions that would have broken most people. Consider what he faced during his years as emperor. The Antonine Plague swept through the Roman Empire, killing millions. Some estimates suggest it killed a quarter of the population in affected areas. Marcus himself may have lost several children to disease. His co-emperor was unreliable. His most trusted general, Avidius Cassius, launched a rebellion against him. The Germanic tribes along the Danube frontier mounted invasion after invasion, requiring Marcus to spend years in military camps far from Rome. And through all of this, Marcus wrote in his journal. He reminded himself night after night that the only thing truly under his control was his own mind. Not the plague, not the war, not the betrayal, just his response to these things. And in that response, he could choose wisdom over panic, patience over rage, compassion over bitterness. Picture Marcus in his tent along the Danube. It is late. The campfires have burned low. He can hear the distant sound of the river and the occasional call of a sentry. His body aches from the day. He was not a young man during these campaigns, and the cold of the northern frontier was hard on his health. He suffers from chronic stomach problems and chest pains. Some historians believe he may have had stomach cancer. But he sits at his small table, picks up his pen, and writes. He writes about the inner citadel. He writes that the mind can retreat into itself whenever it needs to. That you do not need to travel to a country house or a seaside villa to find peace. You carry your peace with you, always, like a snail carries its shell. The retreat is available to you at any moment, on a crowded street, in a difficult meeting, in the middle of an argument. You simply step back, mentally, into that quiet space within yourself, and from there you can observe what is happening without being swept away by it. This is not escapism. Marcus was very clear about that. Retreating to the inner citadel does not mean ignoring your responsibilities or pretending that problems do not exist. It means creating enough distance between yourself and your reactions to respond thoughtfully rather than reactively. It is the difference between being caught in a flood and standing on high ground watching the water pass below. Let your breathing deepen. In through the nose slowly and out through the mouth even more slowly. With each exhale, let yourself sink a little deeper into rest. You are building your own inner citadel right now in this moment. The act of lying quietly, of listening, of letting your thoughts settle, this is the practice. It does not require perfect concentration. It does not require years of training. It only requires willingness. Marcus had a beautiful way of describing the mind's relationship to external events. He compared it to a rock in the middle of the sea. The waves crash against it endlessly, but the rock does not move. It does not complain about the waves. It does not wish they would stop. It simply stands there, solid and unmoved, while the water breaks and foams and eventually recedes. The rock does not fight the sea. It does not need to. The stillness is its strength. You can be like that rock. Not rigid. Marcus was not advocating for stubbornness or emotional suppression, but steady, rooted, able to feel the impact of events without being knocked over by them. The key distinction that Marcus drew was between experiencing an emotion and being controlled by one. You can feel anger without acting angrily. You can feel fear without making decisions based on fear. You can feel sadness without allowing sadness to define you. This distinction is extraordinarily practical. Think about the last time something upset you. A rude comment, a disappointing result, a plan that fell apart. In that moment, the event and your reaction to it probably felt like the same thing. The rudeness and the anger, the disappointment and the despair. They seemed fused together, inseparable. But Marcus would gently separate them. Here is what happened, he would say, and here is what I am feeling about what happened. These are two different things. The event is outside my control. My response is within it. There is a passage in the Meditations where Marcus writes that the things that trouble us are not really out there in the world. They are in our judgments about the world. Take away the judgment, and the pain dissolves. This does not mean pretending that bad things are good. It means recognizing that our suffering often comes not from events themselves but from the stories we tell ourselves about those events. Someone criticizes your work. The criticism is just words, vibrations in the air, marks on a screen. The pain comes from your interpretation. They think I am not good enough. I have failed. Everyone will see that I am a fraud. These interpretations are not facts. They are stories, and stories can be rewritten. Marcus rewrote his stories constantly. When he felt angry at someone, he reminded himself that they were acting out of ignorance, not malice. When he felt overwhelmed by his duties, he reminded himself that this was exactly what he had been prepared for. When he felt afraid of death, he reminded himself that death was as natural as birth. Just another change, another transformation, another step in the endless cycle of nature. The night grows deeper around you. Your body is heavier now, more relaxed, more willing to surrender to gravity and softness. This is the inner citadel doing its work. You have stepped back from the day's events. You have let go of the stories that were troubling you. And in their place, there is this quiet warmth, the sound of your own breathing, the gentle descent toward sleep. Marcus also wrote about the importance of returning to the inner citadel regularly, not just in moments of crisis but as a daily practice. He compared it to maintaining a garden. You do not wait until the weeds have taken over to start pulling them. You tend the garden every day, a little at a time, so that it remains a place of beauty and order. In the same way, you can tend your inner citadel every day. A few minutes of quiet reflection in the morning. A pause before reacting to a difficult situation. A moment of gratitude before bed. These small practices strengthen the walls of the citadel, not against the world but against the chaos of your own unexamined reactions. Marcus would sometimes write reminders to himself that sound almost like prayers. Be like the headland, he wrote, on which the waves constantly break. It stands firm, and around it the troubled waters sink to rest. Another time he wrote, the universe is change. Life is opinion. What he meant was that the facts of your life are neutral. It is your opinions about those facts that create your experience. Change the opinion and you change the experience. This is not always easy. Marcus never pretended it was. He wrote with the honesty of someone who struggled with his own advice. There are passages where you can feel his frustration with himself. Why am I still angry about this? Why can I not let go of that worry? He was not a saint or a superhuman. He was a person like you, doing his best in difficult circumstances. And his best was extraordinary, not because he never failed but because he never stopped trying. The wind outside your window, if there is wind tonight, is the same wind that blew across the Danube 2,000 years ago. The stars above your roof, if you could see them, are the same stars that Marcus watched from his tent. The human struggle to find inner peace is not new. It is as old as consciousness itself. And the tools that Marcus used, awareness, perspective, the willingness to examine his own thoughts, are available to you right now in this moment, free of charge, requiring nothing more than your attention. Rest in your inner citadel tonight. You have built it with every patient breath, with every moment of quiet attention, with every decision to let go rather than hold on. It is not a grand or imposing structure. It does not need to be. It is simply a space, your space, where the noise of the world cannot reach you unless you invite it in. Marcus would understand what you are feeling right now. The heaviness of the eyelids, the softness of the thoughts, the way the body seems to be dissolving into the bed, becoming one with the warmth and the stillness. He felt this too, at the end of his long days, when the writing was done and the lamp had been extinguished and there was nothing left but the darkness and the breathing and the slow, grateful drift towards sleep. Go there now, to that place where thinking stops and resting begins. The inner citadel will be here when you wake, steady and unchanged, ready for whatever the new day brings. And you will be ready too. Not because you have solved all your problems, but because you know, as Marcus knew, that the peace you seek is not somewhere out in the world. It is here. It has always been here. Inside you. Waiting. Rest now. It is enough. Tonight, we will explore a quality that defined Marcus Aurelius more than any other. It was not his intelligence, though he was brilliant. It was not his power, though he ruled the largest empire the world had ever seen. It was something quieter, something humbler, something that he returned to again and again in his private writings. It was duty, the sense that he owed something to the world simply because he was alive in it. Find your comfortable position. Adjust the pillow if you need to. Pull the blanket a little higher or let it fall lower, whatever feels right. There is no wrong way to lie here. There is no test to pass, no standard to meet. Tonight you are simply resting, and that is enough. Marcus Aurelius did not want to be emperor. This is one of the most important things to understand about him. Unlike so many rulers before and after him, he did not scheme or fight or manipulate his way to power. The role was given to him, first by Emperor Hadrian, who spotted something remarkable in the young Marcus, and later by Antoninus Pius, who raised him as a son and prepared him for the throne. When Marcus finally became emperor in 161 AD, at the age of 40, he accepted the responsibility not with excitement but with a kind of solemn resolution. This was his duty, and duty for the Stoics was sacred. The Stoic understanding of duty is different from the way we usually think about obligation. For most of us, duty feels like a burden, something we have to do, something imposed on us from outside. We do our duty grudgingly, counting the hours until we are free. But for Marcus and the Stoics, duty was not a burden. It was the very substance of a good life. To fulfill your role as a parent, a friend, a citizen, a worker was not a sacrifice. It was the highest expression of your nature as a rational social being. Marcus compared human beings to the limbs of a body. Your hand does not resent serving the body. Your eye does not complain about having to see. Each part of the body fulfills its function naturally without resentment because that is what it was made to do. In the same way, Marcus believed each human being has a role to play in the larger body of humanity. Your duty is simply to play that role as well as you can. This might sound demanding, lying here in the soft dark of your room. But Marcus was careful to distinguish between effort and anxiety. You should give your best to your work, your relationships, your responsibilities, yes. But you should not torment yourself over the results. The results are not in your control. Only the effort is. A farmer plants seeds with care and attention, but he cannot command the rain. A doctor treats her patients with skill and compassion, but she cannot guarantee a cure. Marcus governed the empire with intelligence and integrity, but he could not stop the plague or prevent every border from being threatened. This distinction between what you can control and what you cannot is the beating heart of Stoic philosophy. And it is, perhaps, the most useful idea ever conceived for someone lying awake at night worrying. Whatever you are worried about right now, a deadline, a relationship, a health concern, a decision you need to make, ask yourself this simple question. Is this within my control? If it is, then you can make a plan and take action tomorrow. There is no need to worry about it tonight. If it is not within your control, then worrying about it is like trying to change the weather by frowning at the sky. It does not work. It only exhausts you. Marcus applied this principle ruthlessly to his own life. When the Germanic tribes invaded, he did not waste time wishing they hadn't. He assembled his armies and marched north. When the plague killed thousands, he did not rage against fate. He organized relief efforts and maintained public order. When his general Avidius Cassius declared himself emperor, Marcus did not collapse in self-pity. He dealt with the crisis calmly and, when Cassius was killed by his own soldiers, Marcus reportedly wept, not from relief but from sorrow at the waste of a good man's potential. This is what duty looked like in practice for Marcus Aurelius. Not grand gestures or dramatic sacrifices, but a steady, daily commitment to doing what needed to be done, with as much grace and wisdom as he could muster. He did not always succeed. He made mistakes. He lost his temper. He doubted himself. But he always came back to the work because the work was what mattered. Let your mind soften around these ideas. You do not need to become Marcus Aurelius. You do not need to govern an empire or lead armies into battle. Your duties are your own, unique to your life, your circumstances, your particular gifts and limitations. But the principle is the same. Each day you have the opportunity to show up fully for the people and tasks that depend on you. And each night you have the opportunity to release that effort, to set it down like a heavy pack at the end of a long trail, and to rest. Marcus wrote that we should work like we were meant to work, not like a slave who works because he is forced to, and not like a show-off who works because he wants to be admired, but like a vine that produces grapes, naturally without fanfare because that is what vines do. The vine does not ask for applause. It does not compare itself to other vines. It simply grows and bears fruit year after year in whatever soil it finds itself planted. There is something deeply freeing in this image. You do not need to be the best. You do not need to be recognized. You do not need to change the world. You just need to do your work, your real work, the work that only you can do with care and presence and integrity. And then let it go. Marcus also understood that duty extends beyond the workplace. He wrote about the duty of kindness, of treating every person you meet with respect and patience, even when they do not deserve it. Especially when they do not deserve it. Because kindness is not a reward for good behavior. It is an expression of your own character. When you are kind to a difficult person, you are not doing it for them. You are doing it because that is who you choose to be. This is one of the hardest teachings in Stoicism, and Marcus did not pretend otherwise. He wrote about the people who annoyed him, the braggart, the flatterer, the cynic, the cheat. He acknowledged his irritation with them. But then, characteristically, he turned the spotlight on himself. Am I so perfect that I have the right to judge? Have I never been ungrateful, or arrogant, or dishonest? The answer always was no. He had been all of those things at one time or another. And so his duty was not to judge but to understand, not to condemn but to help. The wind has settled outside, or perhaps it was always calm. The night has the quality of deep water, still on the surface with slow currents moving beneath. Your breathing has found its own rhythm now, steady and unhurried, like the pulse of something ancient and reliable. This is your body doing its duty, keeping you alive, repairing the wear of the day, preparing you for tomorrow. It asks nothing of you in return. It just works quietly and faithfully, the way Marcus believed all of nature works. One of the last things Marcus wrote about duty was the most personal. He reminded himself that even the duty to live does not last forever. There will come a day for every one of us when the work is done, when the vine has borne its last grape, when the lamp has burned its last drop of oil. And on that day, the proper response is not fear or regret but gratitude. Gratitude for having had the chance to serve. Gratitude for the days that were given, however many or few. Gratitude for the privilege of being alive in a world that, for all its difficulty, is shot through with beauty and meaning and love. Marcus died in 180 AD, probably in the city of Vindobona, modern-day Vienna. He was 58 years old. He had been emperor for nearly 20 years. He had spent the last decade of his life at war, far from Rome, far from comfort, far from the philosophical discussions he loved. And yet, by every account, he faced the end with the same steadiness he had shown throughout his reign. His last recorded words, according to one historian, were addressed to the officer of his guard. "Go to the rising sun. I am already setting." It is a beautiful image. A man who spent his life in service, acknowledging that his service was complete. Not clinging to life, not raging against the end, just turning, gently, toward the horizon, and letting go. You do not need to let go of anything so final tonight. You are simply letting go of the day, of its demands, its frustrations, its small victories and defeats. You are setting down the weight of your duties for a few hours, trusting that they will be there in the morning, waiting for you, patient as always. And when you pick them up again tomorrow, you will be rested. You will be ready, not because you have found all the answers, but because you have remembered what Marcus never forgot, that showing up with your whole heart to the work of being human is the most meaningful thing you can do with your time. Sleep now. The work will wait. The morning will come, and you will rise to meet it, as you always do, with whatever strength and grace the night has given you. It is enough. It has always been enough. Tonight is the final chapter of our journey with Marcus Aurelius. We have traveled a long way together through his childhood, his education, his rise to power, his years of war and plague, and the philosophy that sustained him through all of it. Now, as the night settles around you for the last time in this series, we will look at what Marcus left behind. Not the empire, which would soon begin its long decline, but something more lasting, something that is still alive tonight, in this room, in these words, in the quiet space between your thoughts. Make yourself comfortable. This is a gentle ending, not a dramatic one. There are no battles left to fight, no crises to manage. Just a man, a legacy, and the soft pull of sleep. Marcus Aurelius died in March of 180 AD. He was likely in Vindobona, a Roman military camp on the Danube, in the territory that is now Austria. Some accounts say he died of the plague that had ravaged the empire for years. Others suggest it was the accumulated toll of chronic illness, the stomach ailments and chest pains that had plagued him for much of his adult life. What everyone agrees on is that he faced death as he had faced everything else. with composure, with acceptance, and with concern for others rather than himself. In his final days, according to the historian Cassius Dio, Marcus called his friends and advisors to his bedside. He did not weep or beg for more time. Instead, he spoke about the nature of life and death with the calm of a philosopher who had spent decades preparing for this moment. He commended his son Commodus to their care, though he must have known, with the painful clarity of a father who truly sees his child, that Commodus was not the man he had hoped he would be. And then Marcus let go. The lamp that had burned so steadily for 58 years went out. The philosopher king was gone. Let your body sink deeper into the bed. Feel the mattress supporting you completely, holding you without effort, the way the earth holds everything that rests upon it. You do not need to hold yourself up right now. You do not need to be strong or alert or ready for anything. The world is taking care of itself for a few hours, and your only job is to rest. What happened after Marcus died is, in some ways, a cautionary tale. Commodus, his son and successor, was almost the opposite of his father. Where Marcus was thoughtful, Commodus was impulsive. Where Marcus sought advice, Commodus relied on flattery. Where Marcus governed with restraint, Commodus indulged in excess. Within a few years, the stability that Marcus had maintained through decades of crisis began to unravel. Commodus was eventually assassinated in 192 AD, and the empire plunged into a period of civil war and instability. But Marcus's legacy was never the empire. Empires, as he himself wrote, are temporary. They rise and fall like waves on the sea. What endures is the example, and Marcus's example, of a person who held enormous power and used it with humility, who faced terrible adversity and met it with grace, who understood his own flaws and worked every day to overcome them. That example has never been more relevant than it is today. The Meditations survived by what seems like a miracle. Marcus never intended them to be published. They were his private journal, his nightly conversation with himself. How they were preserved through the centuries, through the fall of Rome, through the chaos of the medieval period, through wars and fires and the simple entropy that destroys most things, no one knows for certain. But they survived. And when they resurfaced during the Renaissance, they struck readers with the force of a revelation. Here was an emperor who sounded nothing like an emperor. Here was a man of supreme authority who wrote about his own weakness, his own doubts, his own struggles with anger and laziness and fear. Here was a leader who did not pretend to have all the answers but who asked, with aching sincerity, the same questions that every thoughtful person asks. How should I live? How should I treat other people? How can I face suffering without being destroyed by it? How can I make peace with the fact that everything I love will someday be gone? These questions have no final answers. That is part of their power. They are not puzzles to be solved but practices to be lived. And Marcus lived them with a fullness and honesty that continues to inspire 2,000 years after his death. Think about what that means. 2,000 years. The Roman Empire has been gone for centuries. The Danube frontier that Marcus defended is now the border between modern nations. The plague that killed millions is a footnote in medical history. The wars, the politics, the daily crises that consumed Marcus's waking hours. All of it has faded into the past, barely remembered except by scholars. But the words he wrote to himself, late at night, by lamplight, in a cold tent far from home, those words are alive. They are here, tonight, woven into the story that is carrying you toward sleep. Marcus would have been astonished by this. He did not write for posterity. He wrote for survival, to get through the next day, the next crisis, the next wave of doubt or grief. The fact that his survival strategies have become one of the most widely read books in the history of philosophy is an irony that the Stoic in him would have appreciated. Nothing turns out the way you expect. The things you plan for do not happen. The things you never imagined become the defining events of your life. All you can do is your best, in this moment with what you have. And sometimes, just sometimes, that is enough to echo through the centuries. The room is very still now. Perhaps you have been drifting in and out of attention, catching some phrases and letting others slip past. That is perfectly fine. Sleep content is designed to be half-heard, like a conversation in the next room, where the meaning matters less than the tone, and the tone is warm and steady and safe. Let us gather one last time the main ideas that Marcus left us. Not as a list to memorize, but as a handful of seeds to carry with you into sleep, where they may take root in ways you cannot predict. First, the reminder that you are not your circumstances. Whatever is happening around you, at work, at home, in the wider world, it does not define you. You are defined by how you respond. The inner citadel is always there, always available, always yours. Second, the recognition that everything is temporary. This is not a reason for despair. It is a reason for gratitude. The sunset is beautiful because it fades. The meal is delicious because hunger will return. The people you love are precious because your time with them is limited. Impermanence is not the enemy of meaning. It is the source of meaning. Third, the practice of seeing clearly. Most of our suffering comes not from events but from our judgments about events. When you strip away the story, the interpretation, the catastrophizing, the what-ifs, what remains is usually manageable. Usually, it is just a situation that requires a response. And you are capable of responding. Fourth, the commitment to duty. Not duty as a burden, but duty as an expression of who you are. The vine does not resent producing grapes. The sun does not begrudge its light. You were made for something, for kindness, for effort, for contribution, and fulfilling that purpose is not a sacrifice. It is the most natural thing in the world. And fifth, the acceptance of death. Not as something to fear, but as something to hold gently, like a stone worn smooth by the river. Your time is limited. This is a fact, not a threat. And when you truly accept it, you become free from pettiness, free from grudges, free from the exhausting pretense that you have forever. You do not have forever. You have now. And now is enough. Marcus Aurelius was not perfect. He would be the first to tell you so. He was a man who struggled, who doubted, who sometimes fell short of his own ideals. But he never stopped trying. He never stopped writing. He never stopped reaching for something better. Not better circumstances, not more power or comfort, but a better self. And in that endless reaching, he showed us something that no amount of power or wealth or fame could ever provide. The possibility of living with integrity in a world that does not always reward it. The story of Marcus Aurelius is complete. But in another sense, it is never complete. Because the questions he asked are your questions too. The struggles he faced are versions of your struggles. The peace he sought is the same peace you are seeking right now, lying in the dark, waiting for sleep to come. It will come. It always does. Not because you command it, but because you allow it. Like Marcus, you have done your best today. Like Marcus, you have faced what needed to be faced. And now, like Marcus at the end of a long day on the frontier, you are setting down your pen, extinguishing your lamp, and turning toward the darkness with trust rather than fear. The stars are out tonight, whether you can see them or not. They are the same stars that watched over Marcus in his tent, the same stars that will watch over people 1,000 years from now who will never know your name but who will share your experience of being human. of lying awake, of wondering, of hoping, of finally, gently, gratefully falling asleep. Go to the rising sun. Marcus is already setting. And so are you, settling into the deep and restful darkness, carrying with you the quiet wisdom of a man who asked nothing more of life than the chance to meet it honestly. Rest well. The morning will come, and with it, new duties, new challenges, new opportunities to practice everything Marcus taught. But that is tomorrow's story. Tonight there is only this, only rest, only the long, slow exhale of a day that is finished. It is enough. It has always been enough. Good night.